OGaccountability.com.
When you get into healthy mind and you start thinking about things, that thought process that you get in becomes real. It's almost like this. Have you ever been in a situation, or sometimes we don't want to admit to ourselves, but have you ever been in a situation and made yourself mad about a hypothetical situation?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's one of the dangers of being alone with your thoughts too much.
Yeah. Absolutely. And our minds, I don't know why, as a species, we typically always go to like the worst scenario. And so in me and my broken areas, everything sometimes can be really good. And I'm just taking this to relationship, but I will deconstruct it and pretty much self-sabotage just because it's like, I don't feel like going through this again. I don't feel like opening up. I don't feel like, so it really does, when you have an unhealthy mind and you become unbalanced, it becomes a crutch, and not necessarily a crutch. Like, sometimes crutches can be voluntary, meaning I fall back on something when I don't want to do something. I just use that as an excuse. But when it becomes a true, I don't want to use the word mental illness, but it becomes a
compulsion.
A compulsion. But a lot of time we will take people's thought process and say their thought process is messed up. No, it's based on real experience and real situation. And the problem is you carry that on to areas where it's not prevalent and it's not real, but your mind, when we talked about it earlier, you can get guys that look like Greek gods, and they think they're out of shape and fat, and they can't, when you get something that's unbalanced in your mind. So for me, I don't want to say it's that I shut down, but it's just like, it'd just be easier to just not.
Well, and that's a common response to trauma, for sure. Like, it's not like, there's something wrong with you for feeling that way. It's kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about, people don't take care of their health until it's too late. And then those bills, you think you're avoiding bills now, just wait till those bills come due.
Yeah.
It's the same thing in this regard. You think, and I know, because I've been guilty of this too. I have, to this day, like, I have a problem with asking for help, with reaching out to others. Like, I am hyper independent to a fault almost sometimes. And you have to, lost my train of thought. Sorry.
No,
What were you saying?
About, like, in your mind, that you can a lot of times create a reality that's not real.
Yeah. Like, I'll assume people's intentions sometimes. Like, I have a tendency to spend a lot of time by myself and just kind of retreating into myself instead of asking for help, instead of, externalizing things, because I create scenarios in my mind that aren't real.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you for me, especially when I face certain things, I just become non-existent, if that makes sense. Like, it's not that I just become a hermit, it's that I pour myself into well, I know what it is. I know absolutely what it is. People pour themselves, when they've dealt with stress and trauma, they pour themselves into what they can control.
Yes, and I remember what I was going to say now. It's a way to avoid feeling.
Yeah.
You don't want to feel.
You don't want to feel.
So it is a way to avoid feeling, and you think you're avoiding a bill now, by, I don't want to deal with that. Well, just wait until the bill comes due, when you really are out of balance and unhealthy, because you have not addressed this. You have not taken care of yourself. Emotional, hard emotional things in life are hard. They're hard to deal with. You lose a job, you get divorced, you lose a child, you have some traumatic injury. That stuff is hard. It's really, really difficult. But you have to, I've learned this too. Again, I've had to learn this, the hard way too. Stuffing those emotions, trying to avoid them, trying to bypass them, as painful as they are, it's human nature to not want to feel those things, but they're still there. And you do something somatically to yourself when you stuff them. That's why people have outbursts. That's why
Yeah.
people have unhealthy
Hmm.
addictions and behaviors, because you are not getting rid of them by pretending they don't exist. The only way to get rid of them is to allow them to pass through you. That is the healthy way to process emotions, even the really hard ones that we don't want to feel.
And you said something. I said earlier about that guy just out of the blue was like, "Well, you're a child molester," and I'm like, "What? You know what that is? He is trying to get me on his level so he will feel justified for his outburst. So if I can say something to trigger you to make you mad, that allows me to escalate more, but now I don't look like the fool because you're fuming mad too. But when you can keep your composure and be like, you're okay, and you can keep your composure, now what? Some people use anger to control the situation. So I know people that they will use their anger to try to control every. If they don't get what they want, then they get angry and fume up. And then when that doesn't work, I'm telling you, this is how it works. When that their anger doesn't work, then it's I'm going to tell people you and then it's like I'm going to use whatever tactic I can to control the situation. And when you learn to combat that, and people say, "Well, yeah, people can be like that." That goes into every area of your life. Not that's just a scenario. Then you find yourself going to the areas that you can control. Everybody likes to go with to do what they're good at. Everybody. Very few people will ever focus on what they're not good at and focus on those uncomfortable. Like remember Joe said, and we were both in agreement. When you go through recovery and different things like that, let's say you're coming out of addiction, you're going to have to sit alone with those uncomfortable thoughts and feelings.
And that's really hard.
It's
When you have, especially when you have a past behind you where you were addicted and saying and doing things that, no, they're not indicative of who you really are, but you really did those things and you really said those things. And you really have to get real and say, this is the awful piece of garbage that I am
yeah,
when I'm using.
mm,
It's not who I really am,
yeah,
but when I use, this is who I am. And is this who I want to be?
absolutely. And the difficult thing in life, and everybody, man, just like on Facebook and social media, everybody's in the attack mode. Man, people attack people so quick. I saw a guy post a video of he and his kids going fishing. And there's probably 30 people on there. Oh man, I hope you have a great time. Then there's one jack donkey. Well, yeah, I wish you acted like that when your kid was playing baseball and were a good parent. And it's like, why? People are so quick to. But here's the sad part. Here's the sad part. If people would take that, I mean, here's the healthy part. If people would take that own thought process and turn it toward themselves and realize we all of us, everybody, even Mother Teresa had areas in her life where she's like, I could have done a lot better there.
Well, it goes back to the whole thing about like, why don't you look at the plank in your own eye instead of complaining about what Joe Schmo did at baseball the other day?
And I was watching a documentary, and I know everybody has their thought processes on things, but we are such in a thought process to throw people away anymore, and that's not how Jesus was. Remember when he went to the well and he saw that lady there and he asked for a drink? She said, "I'm not where I've been married 5 times, and the guy I'm living with now is not my husband." Did Christ kick her away and throw her away and say, "Get away from me, you whore"? Did Christ say that? No. He goes, "I can give you something that you can't get anywhere. And what I can give you, you'll never be thirsty again." Now he's talking about the physical so she can understand the supernatural.
Well, it's the example that we should be taking, which is you don't judge. We should not be judging anyone. We should love them for who they are and right where they're at, and
Yeah.
invite them to better because they are better and they deserve better.
I was just watching the documentary on Brian Houston in um, Hillsong Church. They removed him.
I need to see that. My hairdresser was telling me the other day that that is fantastic. That documentary.
It is, and I'm not talking about the Carl Lentz part. It branches off, but Brian Houston, okay, who is a human like all of us,
Right.
Believe it or not, and I hope people know that people are like, my pastor's the best man on the face of the earth. He's a good man, yes, but he's got things he deals with. No, he doesn't. Trust me, he does. You're not with him 24/7. You're not in his house. You don't sleep in his bed. You don't, and that's the difficult part. Working with the church, working with people. My daughter gets to see parts of me that nobody gets to see, and I'm very open with her. Like, I'm frustrated today. I'm mad because I don't want everybody to think, well, Daddy's fake. No, people get angry, people get mad. But so here's Brian Houston. I can't imagine the stress this guy's under. Has thousands of employees, branches all over the world, hundreds of thousands of members through satellites. I mean, he's under tons of pressure. He went through some hard time and he started drinking too much. Okay? He was very open about it. Like, I've been drinking too much. Then he was having problems sleeping. I don't know what, I'm just going to say Ambien, but he started taking Ambien. I took Ambien after my surgery. I would sleepwalk. I would get up, make phone calls. I would cook food and wake up the next morning and walk out and be like, oh my God, who was in the kitchen? Like, I would like tell stories and I would never say anything to anybody because I thought like, man. Well, then I was talking one night in front of Peyton's godparents, and her godfather started dying laughing. He goes, my wife, if she takes an Ambien, he's like, before she goes to sleep, 15 minutes before she's like, she becomes a different person. He's like, man, I'll be sitting there, and he said, I was in the hallway, and I see her tiptoeing to the other end, and he's like, go get back in bed. And she's like, somebody's in the room. People do different stuff. So anyways, here's Brian. He had taken some Ambien, and I guess he had a drink. I don't know. I wasn't there, and neither was anybody that wants to throw most of the judgment. I will tell this. He was very honest what happened. He had went to a woman's room and, I guess knocked on her door and went in her room. The woman has said, look, nothing happened. Nothing at all. And once he because I don't know if you've ever taken any sleeping medicine, but Ambien's really bad.
Oh, I have, yeah.
But Ambien has this point, it did for me, that once I'd get past that like 30-minute phase, you go, if you hadn't fallen asleep already, he leaves. Very honest about it. They kick him out of the church. And I'm like, whatever happened to restoration? What happened to loving people and saying, Brian, you made a mistake, man. We're not going to throw you away. We're going to sit here and we're going to hold your hand and be with you. I mean, you're human. But we've just gotten to a place that the people who are throwing him away, if their closet got opened up.
Yes. Now, if that's the reason why it happened, then I totally agree with you. I don't know the details, so I can't really comment or give an opinion. I just do know that when that much money, that many people, like that much business, like as ungodly as that may seem, it's real and you have to consider those things. And so maybe there were other factors at play that forced their hand and they had to ask him to step aside. I mean, I don't know the situation. I don't have a comment until I know the details.
And here's growing up and being involved in organizations. I won't even say church. I've been involved in organizations where there's, 300 churches part of this organization. Some of these churches run 10,000 people. Some of them run 50. And I will tell you, there does come and I don't want to make this about religion, but there does come a case in point to where you have to be super careful what you do, not because it has anything to do with God anymore. It's because your church note's $120,000 a month. Your light bill is $22,000 a month. Your insurance is $37,000 a month. So now you have to become something you aren't and can't be, and God never called you to be. There's only one person that's ever lived to that mindset. But when you get to an unhealthy mindset and think, well, I got to become something I'm not because I got to pay this note every month, and it becomes pastor worship. It becomes more about the pastor and the church than it does about God. So what I'm getting at, yes, people don't realize that bill still has to be paid. So if there's anything that jeopardized that bill getting paid, you're gone.
Right.
And that's sad. That really is sad.
It is sad. It's just like
it's the nature of the beast.
it's just the nature of reality. Like it's not that, like maybe it's not ideal, but it's one of those things where there's jobs at stake, there's livelihoods at stake, there's money at stake, there's these properties at stake,
Yeah.
there's so much at stake that maybe this is not ideal and like this is not the circumstance we want to have to be in, but this stuff matters and we have to do a certain thing.
I've just seen it so prevalent. And let's get into mindset. You know how many pastors commit suicide every year? It's unreal, unbelievable,
I didn't know that.
very high, very very high.
Do they know why?
My father did a really good job of protecting us, and I don't want to say protecting us, but seeing the dark side of dealing with people continually. I'm going to tell you, my experience is the majority of life and people are good.
I believe that deeply.
I really believe that. But the crap heads, I don't want to say ruin it. They muddy the waters for everybody.
You know what though? That has been an eternal problem since the dawn of time. What is Proverbs about? There's all those verses about fools. It was just as true then as it is now. And it's not just the Bible.
No,
Like it's
it's
all through history, through
history,
different
yeah.
cultures. It's there are, you know who else wrote about this a lot was Marcus Aurelius when he wrote Meditations. He had all sorts of stuff in there about how to deal with people and how to deal with foolishness. And I mean, this has been around since the dawn of time.
Then in once you learn about human nature, and I've really been putting this to Peyton because she was telling me about something that happened with one of her friends, and I looked at her and said, Peyton, we all have bad days. Your friend had a bad day. Doesn't mean they're not your friend anymore. And guess what? They're best buddies again. But we've become such a mindset of the throwaway generation to where we're just on to the next. And people don't value friendship and relationships anymore. It's really, what can you give me? I mean, and I don't necessarily mean people go into it with that mindset. It's a subconscious. Everybody's out for the bigger, better deal. What do I get more of? What do I get more of? And people are going to have off days. People are going to have bad days. Pastors, and I'm going to talk about pastors because I got to deal with them directly. If it's not a moral deal to where, like, well, we have $400,000 missing out of the church, no, that's something that's got to be addressed. But just like this, I deal with people. I've got some people I deal with, and I really don't care if they see this because I love them. Every time I'm around these people, they have something to say to correct. This should be done this way. Why are we doing this? Why are these songs played all the time? Why is this too fast? I don't like this. This should be sung that way. We need to use the word the, not the. I mean, have something to say to everything. And you know what I noticed about people like that? Those are people you can't hardly correct or say anything to because they get their feelings hurt so bad. They can say whatever they want to everybody else, but if anybody ever treated them the way they treat people, it's like, oh my God, they're horrible. But guess what? Normally, old David would be like, shut up. But now I'm like, okay, yeah, okay, thank you for bringing that up to my attention. I'll think about that.
Some people, just are the way they are.
And they don't mean anything
They're
by
not.
it.
They're not right, and they're not listening. Not only is it a waste of time for you to try to like get them to change,
Yeah,
it's
no,
just, it would just make things worse, and it would make them angry, and it's
I remember dealing with this lady one time, and she's a broom rider, and I finally said something to her. She was in our choir, and she never talked ever, unless I was talking. If I'd be like, "Hey, we're going to start with so anyways," and she'd turn around and talk to all the ladies, and the ladies would be like, "We're trying to learn a song." She's like, "Oh, sister," and I told her, "You never talk ever unless I'm talking." I said, "The second I start talking, you've got something to say."
I just wonder, like, what compels behavior like that? Because I've known people like that too. That are just like they just have weird things like that. That are just rude, and it's like, why do you act like that?
And I realized that's part of her makeup. And heck, the woman's in her 60s. She's not going to change. That's who she is. But just because somebody's the way they are doesn't mean it's acceptable.
It doesn't mean that you should tolerate disrespect.
Absolutely. But when I brought it up, guess what? I was the biggest trash on the face of the earth. She's quitting the choir and all this stuff.
Well,
And
why does she only treat you that way?
that's a conversation I'm not going to have on camera. But anyways, her and her husband end up doing some pretty bad things, and cause a church split. Liar. Anyways, so I mean, here's what you find out. You know how they say things normally work out in the wash?
Hmm.
Well, time told all things.
It always does.
And kind of find out they were liar, backbiter, sowing discord with everybody, gossiping. I mean, not good people. And when it came out, and that I'm going to get into healthy mindsets. When it came out, this guy's best friend his best friend, vacation with, kids together, traveled. I'm talking about for 20 years. His best friend went to our pastor and said, this person needs to be fired or a forced resignation. That's his best friend. He goes, he's not doing right. He's lying, and this is what's going on. Now, that's his best friend. But this also was a man who stands for integrity and what's right. And even if you're my best friend, if you're doing things that are wrong, so then he went to this man and said, what you're doing is wrong, brother. You got to get it right. That's a real man right there.
Maybe no one's ever, well, that takes courage and that takes selflessness.
People who will stand for what's right, it's not for the act of looking good. That's something that starts in your mind. And that's where I think a lot of people are. As I'm like this with my daughter. You know, if I'm out to eat and the guy's like, damn, you know, I'll be like, you know, whatever. But if I'm sitting there and he's like, motherfucking, you know, I may say, hey, man, keep it down a little bit. You know, when we're sitting over with our families, that's just not language that's really nice in public. That's when I'm going to say something because it's here. So when this gentleman saw something that didn't add up and wasn't right, he's like, no. And you have to choose your battles. If you have something to say to everything, the problem lies with you.
Yeah.
People who have something to say to everything, that's where the problem's at.
Yeah, I can testify to that. I'm a lot quieter than I used to be. And when I wasn't so quiet, it's because I had stuff that was unresolved that I needed to work on,
Yeah.
actually.
And if you said anything, it really just made you more unhappy because you take that evil upon yourself. Then you find yourself thinking about it. And
Shutting up is really, really good for your mental health. It's good for my mental health.
if I could, a lot of times. So what's funny is I don't talk a lot. You know, I'll work by myself most of the time. I'm in front of a computer, in front of a piano. But like sometimes I'll go with my buddy golfing, and I will just talk nonstop. And we've been friends long enough. He realizes, well, Dave's alone a lot. But then sometimes we go golfing. I don't say a word except good shot. That's it. And he's the same way. And we don't talk. We will talk. We will play almost a whole round of golf and have probably said 7 words, and we love it.
That is a man thing.
We love it.
I bet.
It's amazing.
That's a man thing.
Yeah.
Women are not like that at all.
Yeah. And no, I know. But then like sometimes I get around people and I'll just, you know, so and just talk because I hadn't had anybody to talk to. And it's not that I haven't had anybody to talk to. I've just chosen not to talk. I'm very selective who I talk around. Since I am sarcastic, I'm careful who and what I talk about in front of people because sometimes people can think, oh, well, that's who they are. Like, no, dude, I was just joking around.
That's actually one reason that I started to spend a lot of time alone, years ago, is because I was tired of being misunderstood.
Yeah.
Like just really tired of it. And being, not that I care so much about what other people think, especially now, but I was really tired of being judged by like people that didn't even know me. Like, who are you? Like, why are you even talking about me? Like, why don't you just like stay over there and mind your own business?
And you don't, okay, I'm going to tell a story I probably shouldn't tell, but I'm going to tell it. I won't use any names. This just happened last week. There's some people that go to our church that are, I mean, these people are awesome. Great people. Well, this person starts coming and they keep putting a check in the offering plate for a very large amount of money. Well, the people that take up the offering went to our pastors and said, hey, there's a big check in there. So pastor took the check out and went to this individual's family member and said, hey, look, because the person that wrote the check has dementia.
Oh.
So pastor, being a caring man, said, hey, look, they put this check out. We're not going to cash it because we understand that this person has dementia.
Well, we want to double check first.
So pastor gives them the check about. Next week, there's another check. Pastor goes like, hey, so the individual comes back and says, I talked with their other family member, and yes, this check they want. And pastor said, okay, we just want to protect her. We don't want to, Last week, he comes up. They're doing it again, and pastor says, well, we got to get that check. What he meant is this person with dementia is writing these big checks. We better get that check so it doesn't get deposited because they don't have the money that's on that check.
Right.
So 3 days later, pastor gets a text message. I am so enraged that you would take advantage of somebody. And when you said we need to get that check, it showed me that you're money hungry. And pastor's like,
Well, that requires just, some clarification.
so pastor said, no, I meant that because this has been a reoccurring. So now you ready? This was a learning process for all of us. Now our pastor has nothing to do with the church finances. Zero. But he's the pastor, so when a problem arises, they're going to go to him. If he went to the bank right now and said, "Hey, I need to get $3," they'd be like, "Who are you?" He's not on the bank accounts. He can't write a check. So, but in that situation, the pastor should handle like, "Hey, this is what's going on." So, he texts him. He's never heard anything back from him, but it was a learning process. Pastor knew what he meant, but he said, "I should have communicated better." And since I was in a hurry, because he teaches 2 services on Sunday.
Well, that's not something you're like, that specific thing. I don't think anybody would have been specifically mindful of that.
But you never know what people are. So, like he said, I should have said, we need to get that check so it doesn't get deposited and hurt them.
Right.
But
yeah.
But when you're dealing with people, you never know what the other person's thinking.
No, you don't.
And so sometimes I find myself over explaining things because I've had people misrepresent me. And I'm like, that's not what I was saying.
Yeah, that's really, you're talking about healthy mindsets. Like, again, like I just realized this recently that I spend quite a lot of time alone, and I'm happy like that. Because I'm a very cerebral person. I love to read. I love to listen to podcasts. I love to be in nature and hike. So like I almost don't notice like a lot of the time because I'm really happy. But I've also like there's balance, and part of a healthy mindset is balance. And I've started to think about it more, and I realized that that's really the reason that I started to do it was because I was just kind of frustrated and fed up with people and tired of being misunderstood and judged and talked about and discarded, frankly, because we do live in a culture where I don't know if it's social media. I don't know what it is, the fact that we just don't value life anymore in this country.
No, you're right. It's social media, and everybody is projecting, not everybody, most people are projecting a life that's not real. So they have to keep up with. I heard it said so good. Liz, this is good. You ready?
Yes.
When you're leading people to Jesus, you have room for error in your life. Pastors, churches, if you're leading people to Jesus, that means your message has a message of forgiveness and tolerance and realizing we are flawed and we have issues. If you're leading people to you and building a church off your personality, you better be perfect.
Yeah, I've thought about this, and I actually think this is the paradigm shift that the modern church needs. I think that the thing that turned a lot of people off about the church when we were growing up, which really wasn't that long ago, like things have changed so fast, but I really think the thing that turned a lot of people off. So we went to lots of different denominational churches when I was a kid, always Protestant, but we were at a Methodist church for a while, a Presbyterian church for a while, just different places. And I remember them being very, everybody's in a suit, there's pews, there's hymnals,
Y'all
there's.
didn't try out being the fundamental.
No, we didn't try that. But I just remember it being a very formal thing, and I understand it. Like I understand why it was done that way, but it also, I think without intending to, they projected this attitude, which a church should not be doing. This attitude of if you're not perfect, you're not welcome here. And that is, I really like a lot of these. There's one in Conroe that's really good, but there's a lot of modern churches that are led by people who we need to be leading with authenticity and making it very understood that church is a hospital for sinners. Perfect people are not welcome here because they don't exist. So it's leading with this, I was an addict. I was a this. I think it's the Ark Church. I think the guy was a former addict and is like super, super open about it, which is great because it's like, look at me. I am this broken human being. Here is my past. Here are my failings. And here is how God rescued and transformed me.
Yeah. And when we get to the level of acceptance in the church realm, we accept you. And we should accept each other.
That message needs to get out more because I know for a fact that there are a lot of people who don't feel welcome at church, and that's awful. That should not happen at all.
And I think a good way when you get a healthy mindset, whether it has to do with Christianity or living life, when you get a mindset of working, well, look at it this way. Noah saved his household. There was nobody else with him, just his house. And people get in these thoughts and ideas of grandeur because that's our human nature. We all want to do the big thing, and I'm going to go to Africa, and I'm going to be a missionary, and I'm going to do this. Why don't you just start in your house? You
Oh,
want to
yeah.
you want to go out and do all this great stuff, but you have kids that you can't communicate with because there's so much friction and hate in the home. You have a spouse that has so much resentment built up because you're an ass. And I mean, we can go down the line, and that was a little harsh, but see, I'm still a little rough around the edges. But
But be authentic.
and yeah, um, I have to be very cognizant how I speak, and I'm gonna have to tell you why, because I'm very strong mentally. So somebody can look at me and be like, David, get your crap together, dude. You're being a fool. And I'll be like this, dude, I needed that. Thank you. Most people would be like, don't talk to me like that. Like, I can handle it. So I have to be careful how I talk to people. But start in your household. Start in your household on raising, and like Peyton. I've had these conversations just in the past couple of weeks with Peyton. This is one of the things I said to her, and I allow her to talk. She sat down the other night for an hour and a half, and this little girl talked to me, and I'm like unreal. Now
What a compliment.
she's still a little girl. She's still a little girl, so she doesn't understand everything about life. She's a little girl, but her cognizant just on certain things. So I said to her, I said, Peyton, I have no clue what it's like to wake up in two different households. I can't even comprehend what that's like at all. So, you know, there's certain things that you can teach me about that that will help me understand more about you. Because and then it was just like a floodgate, and it was all positive. I mean, good stuff, and we get to talk about things now that, like, I tell her, look, when you don't like something, I want you to speak up and be like, hey, Dad, I really don't care to do this. I said, and you're hitting the age now. She's a woman. She has those monthly hormones that are going to come in. I said, if we're doing something, you have to stop and look at me and say, hey, Dad, I just need to take some time to myself. Go, baby. Now, I drew the line. Now, if you do that every time we start to do something, you're using it as a crutch. But there's going to be times in your life to where your kids are, and this is about mental health, and your kids, your family members, your siblings, everybody. When you grow up with people, you are a kid for a very short amount of time. You want to keep your kid a kid. You want to you want to have that. But now that she's hit the point where there's certain understandings, now it's not an open book when we talk about anything, but I want to create a healthy mindset in her. So here's what I do. I let her talk about things, and instead of responding and correcting her, I let her keep talking to me. I think that's what happens a lot of times in the adult world is somebody says something and we're not really listening. We're just ready to give our response. And if we'll let them complete their thought and what they're talking to, we'll finally realize most of the time we're more on the same page than what we realize.
I'm bad about that, about listening to respond. I think that's really something that most people are bad about. It takes practice to not be that way.
It takes a lot of practice.
Intention.
It takes practice. And there's some weeks that I'll have my phone will ring 250 times and I will talk to hundreds of people throughout the week that sometimes by the end of the week, like especially on a Sunday and I'm done playing piano, I just want to go home and but guess what? I can't, but I want to. And when you get into a healthy mindset and you realize I don't want healthy people just in church. I go out of my way to be nice to everybody. Fast food workers, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hey, have a great day. Thank you so much. I want to be nice to everybody because when we realize our interaction with people, and this is the most beautiful painting in the world started with the brushstroke. And when you're dealing with people, from day to day, you're just putting brush strokes in their life. Why not paint a beautiful picture in their life to where every time they're around you, they feel good about themselves? And you're not blowing smoke up their butt. You're being real with them, but being kind to people. And you realize those little attributes of being kind to people and just thank you, holding the door open for people. Hey, how you doing today? And when you do that to those people, you're creating a healthy outlook on life. They're like, man, there are nice people out here. You know, I remember the first time we went to New York and I was holding the door for somebody and they're like, "Pfft." And I'm like, because
They're not used to
they're just
it.
not used to it. And you know what I did? I'm dead serious. I went just like this. And I let go of the door when they walked through it. I'm like, I won't hold it for you then.
Those people need it more than most, though.
Yeah. Well, that was my passive aggressive,
I'm not going to say I'm any different. I'm just saying.
But we get it one opportunity in this life to make things right. Well, to have a good life. Great thing about even what Christ teaches. What does he say? The righteous falleth 70 times 7 and they get back up in a day. In a day. That's not top much anymore.